A key transfer for the Louisville football program and roster talk for the men's basketball team next season. There's a lot of stuff to talk about on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Let's get right on into it.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I also do some PA announcing work for the university as well. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. We'll begin the show by discussing the surprising news of Tyler Harrell entering the transfer portal. We will then transition into men's basketball, where we will discuss Kamari Lands confirming that he will be a Louisville Cardinal. And we will also talk about Louisville making some of the list cuts for some key transfers in Morehead State's Johni Broome and West Virginia's Sean McNeil. Start out in the football realm. Wide receiver Tyler Harrell has entered the transfer portal, which was a surprising bit of information for the fan base. And it was something that kind of came about very, very quickly. Take it back about a week. This time last week, I actually think it was last week to the day. So it's like 7 days to the day. Last Thursday, might have been Friday. One of the two. I'm losing my mind. Days are kind of running together. But ultimately, there were rumors that came out of nowhere that Tyler Harrell would be heading to Alabama. Now, this was concerning for one of two reasons. Number one, Tyler Harrell was projected to be a big option in the Louisville offense next season, a home run threat that saw an increase in production this past season. He was likely going to see another increase in the fall of 2022. And probably the more concerning of the two reasons was that Tyler Harrell was not even in the transfer portal yet. Now, that sent Louisville fans into a frenzy. I think that 90% of social media Louisville fans were hollering tampering and stuff like that. Let me just speak my mind. Personally, I think we all know, what goes down in college football with this type of stuff. It's not the first time this has happened. It's not certainly going to be the last time that this has happened. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee that he is going to Alabama, but after the rumors started swirling earlier this past week, Harrell entered the transfer portal officially, and just yesterday, it was announced that he would be taking a visit down to Tuscaloosa. So I think that it seems like you can connect the dots, but not a sure thing by any stretch at this point. So you can speculate all you want. And I'm a firm believer that, yes, I mean, is it a little upsetting the way it went down? Do you kind of understand, what's going on? I mean, you can call a spade a spade. I mean, you see what's going on. You don't have to have it spelt out for you. To have you realize what's going on in this situation. But I'll be completely honest. I think that for Louisville fans, my piece of advice would be to try not to stay too upset for long, and instead kind of shift that passion over to the key returning guys in the wide receiving committee and to some of the newcomers. Look, I get it. This will be the last thing I say about Alabama. If he does end up being a member of the Crimson Tide football team, I mean, I can't blame him. He's going to a place that competes for national championships every season. It seems like every class in that program eventually wins a national championship, at least under Nick Saban. And he would likely going to be playing with a Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young. And, Nick Saban has shown that he can get guys to the league, fast receivers. Look at, Jalen Waddle, for example, first-round pick. Now, I'm not saying that Tyler Harrell is as dynamic as Jalen Waddle, but you get what I'm saying. Alabama gets guys to the league, but to play the devil's advocate, so does Louisville. I mean, just look at Tutu Atwell in this past draft, getting drafted second round to the Los Angeles Rams. So Louisville gets guys to the league. I think that he was going to see a ton of success for the Cardinals here in the fall. Unfortunately, he will not be a part of the team, seemingly. I guess he technically could come back and take his name out of the transfer portal, but it seems like that's very unlikely at this time. So it is what it is, unfortunately. It sucks, if you're a Louisville fan. We wish him the best of luck. However, I hope he achieves his goals wherever he ends up. I hope he has a ton of success. I hope he hears his name called in the NFL draft and he's able to walk across that stage. Just because he's no longer a Cardinal anymore doesn't mean that we have to be bitter. I understand it's easier said than done, but at the end of the day, this is just kind of how college football works, especially with the one-time transfer rule. For the Louisville offense, however, I think that this is a big blow to the offense. You lose arguably the fastest player in college football who, was poised to be another home run threat this season, but it's not a loss that completely shatters this offense. I think that you would be doing the personnel on this offense a disservice by suggesting that. What it does, in my opinion, is it kind of raises some of the concerns for a wide receiving core that is yet to prove itself. You do have some key players returning. Huggins-Bruce, I think, is going to be an absolute star. Had a successful freshman season. He's going to be very successful this upcoming year. D. Wiggins, Tyler Hudson, two wide receiver transfers coming in from Miami and Central Arkansas, respectfully. D. Wiggins kind of replaces the production of Justin Marshall. And I think that Tyler Hudson, it seems like the coaching staff and some of the players are absolutely raving about what he did in spring practice. I know that Scott Satterfield was, speaking very highly of him. So I do think that Tyler Hudson is going to take a lot of people. It's going to take college football by storm. He's going to, turn a lot of people's heads, and I think that he has an opportunity to be a standout in the Athletic Coast Conference. Some other players that could fill that role in the slot, you look at guys like Josh Johnson, who saw an increase in production along with, Harrell last season. So he's a guy that, could possibly be the starter in the slot. I'm not going to speculate on the statuses of Braden Smith and Devon Mortimer, who are dealing with some off-the-field issues at this moment. Whenever we get some updates on that, that will provide a little clarity. But for the time being, we will focus on the guys that are that participated in spring ball. I think that if anything, this changes maybe the fact that Scott Satterfield and the coaching staff might go out and try to fill the spot that Harrell left with another wide receiver, try to get maybe a home run threat that can play in the slot and kind of replicate some of the the ideas that you had for Harrell or some of the schemes that you were looking for him to participate in. So it is what it is. It sucks. It truly does. Harrell last season, throughout his career, but last season in particular, he had 18 catches for 523 yards and 6 touchdowns, a long of 92, averaged 29.1 yards per reception. Didn't record a single catch from 2019 to 2020. Had 2 catches for 36 yards in his first season in 2018. So ultimately, is it a tough loss? Well, of course it is. Tyler Harrell has the potential to be very, very good. I think that he ultimately could turn into a receiver that plays on Sundays. But at the end of the day, you have players that I would expect to fill that void. Huggins-Bruce is going to be one of the toughest slot receivers to play against in the conference this season. Maybe they line him up out wide. I think you can use him in a couple different packages. D. Wiggins is going to be a player that I think is a little bit of an upgrade over Justin Marshall. And I think that Tyler Hudson is really going to surprise a lot of people, and not to mention Josh Johnson, Jalen Carter. The list goes on, so on and so forth. There are a handful of receivers that I think are going to make a big difference. And there's some freshman wide receivers that are coming in this season that might see playing time as well. So we will know more as the offseason progresses and as we go through summer camp and stuff like that. So, but that's enough football talk for this episode. I want to transfer. I guess, we'll talk about transfers in the last segment, but transition into the men's basketball portion of the show, talking about Kamari Lands, who earlier this week confirmed that he would be signing with the Cardinals and will be a member of the program moving forward. We'll talk about what that means for the Cardinals here in just a second after we talk about our friends at Built Bar. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here when I say that I usually give up on my resolutions almost before February starts every single year. This year I'm going strong. It's probably the strongest I've ever gone in terms of resolutions. My resolution this year was to eat right. Thanks to Built Bar, I've been able to achieve that. It almost feels like it's really not even a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. If you haven't tried the Puffs, they are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat. And they are covered in 100% real chocolate, as are all of the Built Bars. To be exact, they're low calorie, high in protein. You can go to built.com and scroll down to check out the macros chart to be a little bit more in the know in terms of the nutritional aspect of it. Most Built Bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Mint brownie, coconut, cookies and cream, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it, and it will be delicious and good for you. So do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, that's use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Hey, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. A big announcement that we have made earlier this week. Starting Thursday, April 28th, tune in to Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineup of experts and insiders. And for those of you dying to know who your team will take, catch Odyssey and Locked On's NFL Mock Draft special hosted by Brian Peacock and former scout Matt Williamson of the Peacock and Williamson NFL show all week leading up to the first pick. Once again, that begins Thursday, April 28th. Kamari Lands is a recruit that I hoped would stick with the Cardinals after Chris Mack agreed to the buyout and everything like that, and then Kenny Payne got announced. Jody Demling of Cardinal Authority 24/7 Sports, I think it was maybe a tweet or someone shared the information. Like, I don't have a membership to the boards, but people will send me screenshots from time to time again, be like, hey, look at this. This is pretty cool. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's pretty cool. So credit to Jody on this one. He spoke with the Lands camp and got the confirmation from Kamari and company that he would be signing with Louisville and will be joining the Cardinal program. I think it said late May, potentially. I could be wrong on that. That might have to be checked because I don't know for sure. But ultimately, that is very, very big news for the Cardinals. For a refresher, Kamari Lands is a 6'8" small forward out of Phoenix, Arizona, ranked 47th in the country, according to 24/7 Sports Composite. Chose the Cardinals over Arizona State. Jerry Meyer had this to say about his game when he scouted Lands back on April 8th of 2021. He has him as a first-round projection in the future, and he says, and I quote, has great length for a wing player, has the frame to add weight while already possessing a solid frame, a good athlete with a quality shooting stroke, both off the catch and off the dribble, not known as a creative ball handler or playmaker at this point, more of a straight-ahead slasher when attacking the rim, utilizes a hesitation dribble, can get to a spot for his pull-up jumper, and is dangerous in transition. Has all the makings of being a versatile defender and can rebound for his position. I think when you focus on in his introductory press conference about what he was looking for in terms of the identity of his team, he said, you look for guys that can get out and run, that pass the ball well, that play good defense. I think that really kind of fits the mold of the player that Kamari Lands is. As Jerry mentioned, he's very crafty as a scorer, might not necessarily be a player that creates his own offense, but can, create his own shot, so to speak, and also in catch and shoot situations, which is a very valuable skill. And also being able to take it to the rack with his athleticism. I feel like athleticism is something that this program has been, lacking over the past probably 3 to 4 years, in overall sense. So I think Lands fits what Kenny Payne is looking for in a wing, a solid shooter, a solid defender, a willing passer. That's one thing that I was impressed with when I watched Lands was, as a wing, doesn't necessarily operate a ton with the ball in his hands. One of those players that doesn't necessarily create for others. When the ball's in his hands, he's usually looking to, trying to work into getting into a spot for his own shot, but also has shown the willingness to be a willing passer and facilitator and make some good reads, and also can read the defense pretty solidly. So I think that it speaks volumes when Jerry Meyer has him projected as a future first round pick, a two and done possibility if you made me take a guess. Year one, however, like I said, really hard to make these projections for next season because there are a lot of spots to fill for these for this Louisville roster. We'll talk about two possible additions, or two guys that could be additions in the next segment. But ultimately, in specifics to Kamari and what type of a role he could play next season, I could see him in some situational minutes to where he's playing, 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes a game, depending on how well his shot is falling. This is a Cardinal team that was supposedly adding shooters to last year's team, unfortunately, was never able to really come around in terms of that perimeter shooting. So I think adding some guys that can knock down the deep ball, especially when you have guys like Sidney Curry inside, L. Ellis that does a great job of facilitating and getting the ball to open guys through driving in the lane and penetrating toward the basket. It's an interesting situation. It's a great option, though, to have a player like Lands, because I think that he makes a lot of winning basketball plays, that don't necessarily show up on the stat sheet. I watched a full game of Lands online. I forget who the opponent was, and I was just very impressed with his feel for the game. The game didn't speed him up, nor did it slow him down, really played at his pace. When I do NBA draft scouting, I think that one of the most important skills that you can have, one thing that I prioritize the most, is being able to create your own shot. And I think that Lands has a little bit of a ways to go whenever he is able to add on to his frame and add a little bit more weight. I think that he's going to be getting more successful at doing that and getting to the basket. But I think that creating your own shot off the dribble and off the catch and shoot and being a versatile scorer is something that really bodes well for year one in the Louisville program. I'm not saying he's going to come in and start right away. In fact, I probably highly doubt that he does, but I do think that he is going to be a guy that plays some rotational minutes, could hit some big time shots and score double figures in certain games. So ultimately, very excited to have Kamari confirming that he will be a Louisville Cardinal here in a couple months. So. But I mentioned that there are two possible players that we're talking about in the next segment that have cut their lists, and Louisville is included in both of those. That is Morehead State big man Johni Broome and West Virginia guard Sean McNeil. We will discuss what those two players could bring to the Cardinal program here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information and live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Now, obviously, this Louisville Cardinals men's basketball program has a lot of spots to fill on the roster, which is a good problem to have in some senses because you have the opportunity to add a handful of standouts, but it also is a little concerning just in the sense of, okay, you have to add, some key pieces, to get this team from a losing record last year into the tournament in this upcoming year. So, there's been some concern that there hasn't necessarily been a commitment yet, either in the high school ranks or, in the transfer portal for the Louisville Cardinals and Kenny Payne and company, which it seems like Kenny Payne is taking his time with the assistant coaching staff and things of that manner. But there are two transfers in the portal, some big names. One is probably a top 5 transfer rated right now in Morehead State's Johni Broome, and West Virginia's Sean McNeil, who have cut their respective lists. The Cardinals are in both of those lists. So let's start out by talking about Johni Broome, the 6'10", 235-pound Plant City, Florida native. Spent the past 2 seasons at Morehead State. This past year, 16.8 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, 55.5% from the field, averaged 3.9 blocks per game, which is absolutely incredible. I was actually watching the game against Murray State in the OVC championship, and he had 32 points and 8 rebounds to go along with 2 blocks and 2 steals. He has cut his list to 8, and there are some college basketball heavyweights included in that list cut. I'll read them from left to right in the graphic that Joe Tipton posted on Twitter. In the final 8 is Duke, Gonzaga, Louisville, Florida, Houston, Auburn, Memphis, and Kentucky. So obviously it is going to be a challenge to secure a commitment from the Sunshine State big man. But he was rated by Jeff Goodman of Watch Stadium as a top 5 transfer in the portal currently, and obviously would be a huge addition to the Louisville program. Now, some have questioned, okay, with him being a back-to-the-basket big, which that's pretty much what he is. He's a rim-running big man that is very good at rim protection and the ability to, back opposing defenders down with solid footwork and, having a solid touch in the paint and good, interior offense. So the question is, well, how does he coexist with Sydney Curry? And that is a good question. That's one of those that I've kind of pondered the answer to because I don't have a clear-cut answer. I think that I'm a firm believer that you take the talent and, you take the commitment and then you worry about fit later because you have months to worry about that. I'm not saying it means much, but Sydney Curry did share vocally on social media that he would like Broome to be here. Reposted a story on Instagram, I believe. So it's hard to think that they would be on the court at the same time for long stretches of the game. But needless to say, I think that Johni Broome, despite Jalen Withers, JJ Traynor, and Sydney Curry coming back, is a 100%, no question, by all means, take and don't even look back because he has a potential to turn into a very, very solid big man at the Power 5 level and could land on an all defensive team. I think that his rim protection alone warrants should warrant a look from Kenny Payne, but ultimately, he is a guy that I think could transform a Louisville team in the front court, and then you have an option. I'm not sure who would be the starter. You would assume Sydney Curry would be the starter, but still, you just never know. But the thing about it is all these other programs. You look at a place like Kentucky. If Oscar Tshiebwe comes back, how does he fit with Johni Broome? Duke has some Derek Lively, Kyle Filipowski. He's coming in, or those two are coming in. A lot of these schools have big guys that are, that are going to have to contend for minutes. I think he's got I think it's a visit to Auburn coming up, and if he leaves that visit unattended or uncommitted, I should say, I think it's kind of wide open. So the key here will be to see if Kenny Payne can get Johni Broome to, schedule a visit and come visit the Derby City. So Johni Broome would be a great addition, as would West Virginia guard transfer Sean McNeil. Now, McNeil, there's a little bit of a different lure to the Louisville program. He is a native of Union, Kentucky, up in northern Kentucky by Cincinnati. 6'3" senior, who I believe has 2 seasons of college eligibility remaining. Last year scored or averaged 12.2 points per game. That is 41% from the field, 37% from behind the arc, and 87% from the free throw line. 2.5 rebounds per game. Really is kind of an advanced shooter, known basically as a scorer, an undersized 2 guard, if you will, kind of playing the Ryan McMahon role. He recently cut his list to 6, though that list includes Ohio State, Virginia, Louisville, Cincinnati, Indiana, and Texas Tech. So I think that, you've seen it over the past couple of years. Ryan McMahon Quinn Slazinski, Matt Cross. All of these guys were brought in to be proficient shooters and to provide some, three-point shooting threat. Ryan McMahon was. Quinn Slazinski and Matt Cross never really could find their shot consistently. Sean McNeil, if he were to commit to Louisville, you would assume that would be the role in which he was brought into. Could play, maybe 25 minutes a night. And really be a key part of the rotation as a secondary or tertiary playmaker. I think he's shown that he's not just a shooter, can also score in the mid-range and has the underrated ability to get to the basket. So ultimately, both guys would be great additions. Sean McNeil, I feel like Louisville would have a better chance with McNeil than they would Johni Broome, considering the fact that there are a plethora of teams after Johni Broome, and he is one of the highly transfers on the transfer portal right now. And that's not a disrespectful, it's not meant in a disrespectful way to Sean McNeil, because he's a very valuable player as well, averaging double figures the past 2 years on the Big 12 level in a very solid conference for a West Virginia team that hasn't really had a number one scoring option. So ultimately, it's great that these list cuts are including Louisville. We will see if the Cardinals can get either on a visit here soon. But there are going to be some bonus episodes over the next couple of days. There will be one with Shane Young, Forbes.com NBA writer, to talk about Donovan Mitchell's situation in Utah. Thanks for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. But hey, that's going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Tune into the bonus coverage. We will see you right back here. I guess here in a couple hours, depending on when you listen to it, but definitely on Monday.